Hello out there, my name is Laulu Akode and you are on to Inside Sources. But first, here is my take for today entitled An Open Memo to Former Vice President Atiku and former Governor Peter Obi. Today, we'd like to address two of the leading Nigerian opposition politicians on the question of Nigeria's future. The purpose being to reiterate what is and what is not in the best interest of the Nigerian people as the political charter for 2027 is brewing. As a people, we should be tired already with the opportunistic moves of many of our leading politicians who simply weaponize the suffering and the struggles of the people as a pathway to power with little or no substantial desire or motivation to bring a true transformation in the land. We have gone through this path before, especially in 2013 to 2015, and it is yet to deliver the desired change. What then is the use of doing the same thing all over again and expecting a different result? First, to Mr. Peter Obi, the presidential candidate of the Labour Party, on the issue of forming an alliance ahead of 2027. Earlier this week, Obi said, and I quote him, "For me, what is important is let us discuss Nigeria, whether we are going to do coalition. Let's talk about the future of the country. But often we abandon the country and what we need to do but talk about power." Actually, he said, but talk about power grab. He continued, and I'm quoting now, "I am not interested in any coalition for the purpose of taking power. It's about discussing Nigeria." Quotation ends. Now, coming from Mr. Peter Obi, this was so inspiring because Obi got it right. Power grab for its sake is what dominates the narrative, and politicians use it to make their opponents look very bad, but not because they themselves are significantly better or that they have any better plan. But then, Obi was forced to do a clarification because he felt compelled with the interpretation for those comments that meant that he is not in support of the much talked about political alliance for 2027. So, Mr. Peter Obi made a rejoinder. This is what he said, and I quote him, "Let me set the record straight. I am not against coalition. In truth, I am for it, not for power grab, but for positioning Nigeria's greatness." So let us address Mr. Obi directly. The coalition that Nigeria needs now is not one for power grab. Peter Obi got it right. Kudos. But that coalition cannot and should not be left in the hands of politicians alone. In fact, that coalition is not about elections. We need a coalition, a national consensus. We need a coalition of non-political elite to speak out for the common interest in these issues and several others. We need to take these matters off the partisan agenda. But in the end, we must compel our politics and our politicians to adopt such a common agreement on these matters and on these issues, just like they did signing a peace accord normally at the eve of an election. But many politicians themselves will not push this kind of an agenda or this kind of a traction because they are the beneficiaries of the current distortions in our politics and in our national life. So, if Mr. Peter Obi understands this, let him begin to clamor for non-political elites to get in on it. The pastors, the imams, the traditional rulers, the business leaders, the professors, labor, media, professionals, leaders of thought in all our communities, women and youth, all of them should get involved in this reform, in this national consensus. Let us develop the national consensus just like we have all accepted that we don't want military coups anymore. That is a national consensus. Just like we have also accepted rotational presidency. That is a national consensus. And that is where we now turn to former Vice President Abubakar Atiku. Alhaji Abubakar Atiku is a consummate politician who has demonstrated capacity to build a true national following. In Nigeria, his knack for bringing people together across the divide is to be commended. However, by electing to run against the national grain of rotational presidency in 2023, Mr. Atiku brought himself under intense scrutiny about his motivation and his regard for national cohesion. But beyond that, his party has suffered a debilitating impairment, a devastating sore capable of outrightly destroying PDP. And the truth is that the PDP problems, or the problems of PDP that we see today, for the most part, came out of that inordinate effort to denigrate our national consensus on rotational presidency. Former VP Atiku must think about his options very gingerly coming in 2027. It is clear he wants to run for president again, but that again will be against the grain. Of course, he has the right to, absolutely, but he cannot refuse our national consensus without having to suffer political consequences sooner or later. Nigerians have settled on the idea of rotational presidency. Nigeria has owned up. It's a national consensus on rotational presidency. 8 years to the south and 8 years to the north. Back and forth, like that. President Buhari from 2015 to 2023 from the north took it for 8 years. It is now the turn of the south from 2023, and it must be for 8 years. So to both the presidential candidates, that is Mr. Obi and Mr. Atiku, and indeed all who care to listen, what Nigeria needs now is an elite and a national elite, national all people's consensus, a development bargain. We cannot be doing the same thing and expect a different result. And there you have it. Inside Sources will be right back. Welcome back to Inside Sources. Today, we want to have a short discussion to open the edition on what is happening in the international arbitration case between the federal government of Nigeria and Sunrise Power and Transmission Company that is also owned by a Nigeria chief, Leno Adesanya. We recollect that last week, all day through last week, as a matter of fact, in Paris, there was an international arbitration under the auspices of the International Chamber of Commerce because Mr. Leno Adesanya had taken the matter for international arbitration because of the cancellation of what he said was an award from the federal government regarding the Mambilla power project. As most Nigerians will recall, the Mambilla power project is meant to give us over 3,000 megawatts of power, but we have been on this project, if I'm very right, for over 4 decades or 5 decades thereabout, just going back and forth. To discuss that with me today, I have a very brilliant Nigerian lawyer who has also featured here before, so that we can look at the legal issues, in a broad way, just to keep Nigerians informed about what it is that is happening. So I'd like to welcome back to Inside Sources, Mr. Ibrahim Wali.
Thank you so much, Laolu. It's always a pleasure to visit you, to come here and have the opportunity to express myself regarding these issues. And
thank you.
It's not different this time around.
Thank you so much. It's a matter that I have taken a very definite interest in for a few reasons, especially the fact that you now have two of our former presidents actually, traveling abroad to give a testimony. And the fact that, look, this Mambilla power project has been on for over, clearly almost up to 5 decades. We've been going up and down, up and down. Not a very good report of our national life, but hopefully we're going to get around to it. So I wanted to ask you, first that. So this idea of international foreign arbitration clauses in this contract, I do understand that because at times there are international dimensions, but it will seem, and some people have argued that it's also it's not so much a good indication of what is happening in our judiciary. Mr. Wali, can you educate us on this matter?
Hopefully. Thank you. It's quite an intelligent question. But before I go into the crux of the question, because you already mentioned 2 former presidents going in to give testimony, this matter began, I think, around 1970. Well, not the matter, but the conceptualization of the dam itself. So it went through, all those eras to President Olusegun Obasanjo. If you look at the transcripts and the reports of everything that's happening with the case, there are parts that happened during Yaradua. The cancellation of there was parts that happened during Jonathan, parts that happened under Buhari, and now we're doing this. So two former presidents testifying is just part of, the whole thing, but it involves all these presidents and all these administrations. It's important to say because it has more implications, obviously, than just their testimony, because it means for 4, 5, 6 decades we've not been able to, resolve these issues regarding a very key, critical infrastructure in Nigeria. But anyway, coming back to your question, it is very important to contextualize that arbitration exists to complement litigation, right? So it is not because our judiciary particularly is slow or inefficient, but the fact that the litigation process, generally, even outside Nigeria, is quite obviously litigious by the name. It is hostile, it is contentious, and quite takes time, whether it's in Nigeria or outside Nigeria. Obviously, in Nigeria, it is exceptionally, it takes exceptional delays and stuff like that. It is not an exoneration of the judiciary as much as it is an affirmation of the machinery of arbitration, which exists on its own and exists really to simplify the settlement of disputes. And of course, for international matters of this nature, or international matters generally, because one of the arguments, obviously, is whether in fact the panel has jurisdiction, but then I'm sure we'll get into more technical issues like that. But yes, it's not very much about the inefficiency of the judiciary, but then the litigation system entirely, and what arbitration offers to you. But you also have to understand that parties get to decide at the, contract stage whether or not they want to take the arbitration route, and that's one of the arguments for Sunrise. I'm not holding any of their briefs, by the way. It's very important to say. But one of the arguments is that in the 2003 initial contract or award, there was a provision for arbitration at the ICC. So the ICC derives its jurisdiction from parties submitting to it. And if you have submitted to it, then you will not come back and say that, obviously there are other factors, but based on the fact that whether it has jurisdiction or not, but it has nothing to do with the Nigerian judiciary. If you remember when EFCC declared Mr. Leno wanted and his lawyers went to court, Justice Eko of the Federal High Court said that the matter was already before an arbitration panel, and then they ought to respect it. They should take it down and wait for. So it shows that even the judiciary recognizes, arbitration. Yes.
Okay, one of the things that I find quite interesting, actually two things. We take it one after the other. The first one is, so it's a novelty, and I wanted to get an insight from a lawyer to have, and you are right that look, this has certainly involved 4 presidents: Obasanjo, Yaradua, Jonathan, Buhari, and now actually 5.
Yes.
So, but you have 2 of them. Yes. Who were persuaded, who have agreed, who did present testimonies last week in Paris. And we know that, of course, it's private. It's
a private arbitration,
yes. But I'm sure that we're going to get more information about it, because there's going to be a judgment.
Immediately there's an award.
And when there's a judgment, it becomes public. As a matter of fact, I contacted the arbitration panel, and they said that the parties have agreed to. One
of the advantages of arbitration, and that's why parties prefer to opt to it, because you can agree for all these things.
For private hearing, because
some of the witnesses would prefer.
Because I thought that this is something for a reporter like me, that was a novel thing that ought to be covered. And I was trying to buy my ticket to go to Paris, but I was told by the hearing is private.
It's private.
But the novelty of having 2 former presidents. How does that look from, what's the legal optics? How often does that happen? To have, even in a Nigerian court, how often does that happen to have 2 former presidents, giving testimony, not to even talk of the fact that he's now abroad? What's your take on that, Ibrahim?
For starters, there's been many cases in Nigeria where people tried to subpoena or to try to get former presidents or even former public officials to come and testify, and I'm sure that most of them or all of them have gone to a nullity. So to have two former presidents fly to Paris, first of all, tells me that obviously they regard and respect the panel much more than whatever it is we have in-house. But in terms of the legal optics, I think what they're trying to do is to show that, because obviously I want to believe that they give testimony on behalf of Nigeria, the federal government.
Yes,
like, so they want to show that they didn't give out the contract, they didn't affirm the contract and stuff like that. But I think what that seeks to do is to add credibility to our case that, okay, the chief, the presidents at the time didn't even sanction this deal. Obviously, one of the grounds for, setting aside or for the ICC deciding against maybe Sunrise, one of the really cogent grounds, if you look at maybe Metal Talk versus Uzbekistan, is public policy. That is one of the grounds where the court would not enforce the arbitral proceedings. So public policy covers corruption, bribery, and stuff like that. So they want to make a case and say that, okay, there was no due process. They didn't. So it maybe or maybe not adds to the credibility of the Nigerian case. Nigerians, yes, but I think that the court prefers more direct evidence of bribery as opposed to absence of due process, which is not particularly, corruption or bribery, but has some elements that you can incorporate. All the same, we're not going into the technical arguments, it's before the panel. But but in terms of the national optics, I think it is very bad because, for starters, what they are claiming is £2 billion, quite some money, but I don't think it's enough for two former presidents to give testimony. And if you look at the history of the whole saga, you would see that it involves a lot of ministers, AGFs. Malami was part of it. Even Ndoaka at some point was part of it. Minister Sali, former Minister of Power, was part of it. Minister of Power, Dwayne Obasanjo, was part of it, who is now before the court, for he connected with the case. So I think that there should have been enough officers, enough evidence, enough documents, to have to, so that the former presidents do not have to actually fly to Paris to give testimony. But it just shows that lack of due process, lack of recording, it's just, I think it's bad faith in my mind.
Let me give you an example of why, I felt quite a bit of concern for those presidents. We've been told, by my reliable authority, that the first question that was put before one of the presidents, and we'll mention his name, was that whether it is true that his daughter actually married his attorney general.
That is the problem with
that kind of embarrassment.
Yes, that is the problem with obviously availing yourself for situations like this. The other party gets to ask you all these questions, and you're subjected to it. I would have loved an opportunity to cross-examine some of them myself, but sadly, maybe if I see myself at the ICC someday. But it's just, for me personally, the fact that they don't come to us, to Nigerians, to give account and get questioned, but then they are eager to fly to Paris. I know for Obasanjo, for example, he mentioned that, I don't know, I think his minister, he's very strong against the minister, and the minister is also, so for him, he said that he wants to actually go and testify because he didn't give an approval. Exactly. His FEC didn't give an approval, but the reality is, $6 billion contract at the time. Obasanjo was a strong man, quote unquote. I don't think that would have flown under him without any. But look, I'm not the one to make any.
That's the argument of the minister.
Yes. I'm not holding his brief because if he did something wrong, he did something wrong all the same. But two truths can.
Okay, so let's come, as we begin to wrap it up, because of our time. I just wanted to also have this important insight. So the strategy of the federal government on this matter seems, just like you've also articulated, is to nip this thing in the bud of corruption.
It was the same thing that happened in P&ID.
Yes. To say that, look, this is corrupt.
The contract ab initio.
But from all the documents that I have seen, because I've watched this very closely, you have a legal opinion, even in 2005, from the Afe Babalola chambers. I have seen, I have a copy of that legal opinion, by the way, that says specifically that there is a legal contract between the federal government and Sunrise. You know, so when you then have the former president say, oh, look, I never approved this, I wanted to ask you as a lawyer, so how do you balance that, you know, in just assessing the evidence theoretically? You know, so the president is saying that, no, I was the president at the time, you know, and it's my policy that that you cannot award that kind of a contract without my say-so. But here comes a legal opinion, because in 2005 the matter had become, you know, quite testy, at the time, and that's why they needed somebody like Afe Babala's chamber to give a legal opinion. Yes, and he gave a legal opinion that said that, look, Nigeria has a contract with Sunrise on this matter. How do you theoretically balance the two? How will you assess the strength of our argument as a country that this is a matter of corruption?
Okay, for starters, legal opinions are opinions, just like my chiefs and just like mine, all the same, right? But I think the issue here is that, for me personally, is that even after 2003, because I keep saying that, you know, there was no due process and stuff like that, even after 2003, there was an upstamping or some sort of affirmation of the contract by the Goodluck administration, and even subsequently by the Buhari administration, at least by some of his... By
delegated ministers to even go and talk to the guy.
And then they agreed to a settlement, $200 million in reinstatement as a local partner. So by contractual parlances, even if he was illegal, you have literally ratified and affirmed it.
By those actions.
By those actions. And I don't think that there's any law that particularly says that the president must sign an agreement or a contract, or even was given, there are certain things where the president must give approvals, but like contracts of this nature, it is not in law that, you know, because he keeps arguing that the FEC did not give its approval, but the FEC is the president, his ministers, his vice president and stuff like that. So the constitution gives their, you know, roles, but it doesn't say that they must actually really sign or give approval for you to give out any contract whatsoever. And at the time, the Public Procurement Act was not in force. It came in force in 2007.
Right.
And it created BPP. So, you know, I saw some arguments about BPP not being involved there. They didn't have a BPP. There are certain things, certain policies, like you mentioned, you know, but some of them weren't even codified properly. To even say. So my concern is, I personally do not see any utility or any sense in giving out a project of that nature to Sunrise at the time. It was established, I think, 2 years before, in 2001, 2 years before the contract. Yes, they didn't have any track record. They didn't have any evidence of capacity or whatsoever. And so I'm not ratifying the contract, frankly. But the grounds, the argument I've seen from the federal government themselves, I'm not very sure. And I'm sure that is the route the legal opinion took as well. There's just no evidence, at least not that I have seen, that shows clearly that there was corruption, there was bribery. And I think that was why the EFCC and, you know, started to say, okay, let us prosecute these people. But then all of it came after they went to the arbitration panel. So it wasn't as if EFCC were, you know, going through their records and decided. But I think it just brings to fore the incompetence of our institutions, because the Ministry of Power is involved, the Ministry of Works, you know, different ministries, different ministers, different AGs, and it's still issues on this. So we would have to wait and see.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ibrahim. Well, that's my view also, that not being a lawyer, but I wanted to check with the lawyer that, look, it seems that Nigeria, the federal government needs to come up with much more damning evidence to be able to make this another PNID.
Yes.
But thank you so much, Mr. Wale, for coming to Inside Sources. And, you know, we will follow the case.
Definitely.
You know, it's evolving. We are getting more information about what happened. We will ultimately get the ruling of the panel.
We pray that it's in favor of Nigeria. I don't know how that's going to look like, but
we pray.
Yes.
We pray. But yeah, we see how it turned out. Thank you so much for coming.
It's my pleasure, sir. It's my pleasure.
All right, the Inside Sources will be right back. Welcome back to Inside Sources. We want to now have a segment to basically look at the few issues that have been developing both in our country and outside. And to join me in this roundtable conversation today, I have to my immediate right, Mr. Etim, a retired banker, senior journalist, and author. welcome back to Inside Sources.
Thank you very much, Laulu.
All right. And also to my far right, I also have Malam Baba Yusuf, a strategic advisor and the former MD, actually the first Nigerian MD of NACO Free Trade Zone. Malam Baba Yusuf, welcome back to Inside Sources.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So let's get to it. Let's start from, what is happening in the U.S. and its implication for our country. I mean, clearly exciting even for us in Nigeria. The last piece of news we got from there regarding Nigeria said that about a little less than 4,000 Nigerians are on the list of illegal immigrants who will be deported, in the massive deportation that we are seeing across the world from the U.S. So I'd like to start with you, Eti. So how do you, what do you think is happening among our population, both at home and abroad, knowing that, that kind of chunk of Nigerians are going to be sent home against their will? What does that tell the average Nigerian who wants to, quote unquote, jack back?
Well, to answer your question directly, what it tells the average Nigerian is that the next 4 years is not your time to migrate illegally to the U.S. The ICE, the Immigration Security Agency, are waiting for you at the borders to deport you or send you to Guantanamo Bay. So better bear with us and stay back in the country for the next 4 years. But let me also say that what Trump is doing now is what he promised, and he spoke about it. So nothing has taken us by surprise. He wants to protect Americans from the dangers that illegal immigration poses. You may agree, you may not agree with him, but the point is that the first duty of a government or a president is to protect the citizens of that country, not the immigrants, not outsiders. So he has assessed that illegal immigrants come down to U.S. and become very violent, kill people. Not all of them, of course. Many of them are good, working in the farms, working in the stores. But a few of them are bad apples, and a few bad apples usually spoil a lot in the basket. So Trump wants to get these people out. There are very good Nigerians, many of them who might have migrated there illegally. I'm sorry that they will be caught up in the web. They can just come back home and help us rebuild the country, which we have been doing in the last 60 years. I have been here building this country with other compatriots.
Okay, all right. I mean, very good hoping. Madam Baba, what's your own take on that issue?
Well, Donald Trump, we are already experiencing Trump 2.0. Permit me to expand the immigration conversation to also cover the birth, citizenship, immigration, which is also affected. People like that are also affected. So let us also understand that it is not just about illegal immigrants, actually. It's a whole, migration policy that Trump came with, which also has covered the birth, citizenship, birthright citizenship provision, which has been there for long. Ironically, President Donald Trump is a sire, second-generation American, whose grandfather emigrated from Germany, and in the late 1800s. And if you ask me, the circumstances of the first immigration to U.S. by the grandfather of Donald Trump and his subsequent return to Germany, and how he was able to sneak out of Germany to come back to America, could be tagged whether legal or illegal. The point here is America was built with the sweat and blood of immigrants. And the definition, defining illegal immigrants in this context is also contextual, Prof. Because a lot of people are providing critical service, to the American people for many years. I am not promoting illegal immigration, but we all know the far right wing, philosophy of MAGA, make America great strategy is premised on a right wing more or less right-wing philosophy of President Donald Trump to quote-unquote get rid of America of all illegal aliens, whereas ironically 60% of the people that are driving the economy of the United States of America at one point or the other, first generation, second generation, third or fourth generation, happen to come into America through one means of migration or the other, and including the birthright citizenship, which is now an issue. So I think it is 4 years of Trump too. Now, this will most likely redefine the politics of America. My call out to Africans and those that are engaging in illegal immigration is stay away from that. Try to follow through the process. But importantly, we should also redirect our success on our leadership, Prof, because that is the part of the problem. The failure of leadership in Africa is what is making most of these people to be desperate. Nobody will go out of his own comfort zone to go and become, quote unquote, a rodent in another country that are being chased out. We can have that conversation later.
All right.
But let me just quickly clarify something that a court in U.S., I think late last week, has struck out the executive order banning birthright citizenship.
Well, so is that put like an injunction?
Injunction. So it can't stand. It is a constitutional matter. It's there in the Constitution.
Right.
And you cannot amend the Constitution by executive order. And that's what the court says.
Right. Right. In fact, just to follow up on that, the judge that and I think the judge was in Washington, D.C., if I'm right. Actually, a judge that was appointed by Ronald Reagan.
Correct.
Is also a Republican, did say that he couldn't believe that a lawyer, in his comment, I couldn't believe that a lawyer can even argue that an executive order can superimpose on a constitution. So the comments of the judge, seems as if the matter has been
I think
decided.
it's clear. It's there.
But at least he has said that, look, we're going to set a date for the airing of but he did put an injunction that that particular executive order should be suspended. So that, we're going to see what happens. But there's another area in which it affects Nigerians. So it will seem that Nigeria is going to be losing about $1 billion in total grants and aids that normally comes from the U.S. In this freeze of American grants abroad that the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, put in place the moment that it was sworn in. And one of the areas where that will affect us, is in the AIDS or provision of HIV drugs. And there's been quite a bit of conversation on social media and all over the place, how that is going to really affect Nigerians and some of our own medical, but even PEPFAR, some of the things that have been in place since George W. Bush to try to support health issues around the world, especially in Africa. Funding for that is going to stop. I know that the U.S. government normally gives about $100 million directly to Nigerian government, but when you add everything together that they are giving to other agencies that are in Nigeria, it comes to close to about $1 billion.
Yes.
Now, how do you guys think this is going to pan out? Let's start with Etienne.
My concern is on the health issues because President Bush put in place a plan in which drugs for HIV and AIDS are subsidized and sent to us and other African countries. And now those drugs are either going to be too expensive or unavailable. And that's where my focus is. What should Nigerian governments do to ameliorate the effects of this ban? My thinking is that the government should quickly get in touch with the manufacturers of those antiretroviral drugs and provide funding, direct funding to the manufacturers and bring these medicines to the country. We should quickly treat this as an emergency case because we have the AIDS penetration in this country was fairly high, up to 5% at the time, driven down to I think 4.5%.
One of the highest in the world.
Yes, one of the highest in the world. So right now I think it's between 4.5, and we should not allow HIV/AIDS pandemic to rise again. That should be the focus of the Minister of Health and the federal government.
Okay, thank you. Madam Baba.
The entire foreign policy strategy of Nigeria should change, and indeed for Africa. In direct response to that, Prof, the response to Trump with regards to AIDS, in my humble opinion, should be a continental reply, if that is possible. Because
from AU?
From AU, if that is possible. Yeah. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Trump is a transactional leader. Trump is operational. He, with all due respect to Trump, doesn't have that foresight. Africa remains the hot pot of the raw material that drives the world. Africa remains the hot pot of human capital for the world. The earlier we start behaving that, because we believe that and act that way on the table of conversations around the world, the earlier we start getting what you call for Trump the better deal. Coming to Nigeria, for example, for the quick wins,
right,
is first of all to go back into our strategic reserves, to make quickly in our budget. Because I was saying in another forum that, you know, there's need to tweak our budget, whether in terms of the economy, in terms of the variables, because of Trump's policies. And now this has come. The palliative provision, Mr. President has provided over 500 billion in palliatives last year to states. Now, within the framework of those provisions, immediately, as a matter of national priority, to take out a percentage of that money for what? Not just for HIV and AIDS, for all communicable diseases, to provide that intervention and put in the queue ahead of time for production, because we have supply chain issues for producing this particular medication. That is at the national level. Beyond that, to understand that there's a wave of right-wing nationalistic tendencies across Europe, not just America. And for African leaders to smell the coffee, that this issue of going cap in hand to beg for aid, to the extent that the aids are not coming and we are scratching our head and picking our noses, is a reality. And that leadership should change. The paradigm of leadership should change.
Completely.
You should take care of your own. You campaigned and swore to uphold a constitution and provide security and well-being of your people. And then you carry agbada or suit, whether it is from Central Africa or West Africa, and be rushing up and down to America. And to that extent, I agree with Trump. Face inwards, build your capacities, take care of your own. That is what Trump is doing, albeit a bit on the too far right side. But you can't blame him, because we have the resources here. So we can leverage that and say, Trump, we hear you loud and clear. But the lithium that Elon Musk is looking for, we are not going to give it. Yes. So we need to have you see what I'm talking about, the strategic positioning. And at the EU level, to sit down and get our acts together and come and sit down and say, hey, whether it is a military dictator or a Democrat, whatever, to say we have a continental problem. This guy in America will not take us serious until we pull his hand and show him the resources and show him what we have to offer to the world, not just to him. And that if he doesn't take it, China is already taking, others are taking, and I can tell you, Trump will reverse it. You know why? Trump is a realist to an extent. Within 48 hours, after all the grammar is blowing about tariffs, he turned around and started throwing an olive branch to China, being the first person to call Xi Jinping, start moving from what I call aggressive narrative to conciliatory narrative, scaling down the tariff to 10% from 50%. Right. And now with Deep Sea coming out, say, we need to have a conversation, is a wake-up call for us. So Trump will face the reality if we put our acts together. Necessity is the mother of invention. Crucial leadership for Africa going forward is what is key, because like I said in my column, whoever becomes the president of America as a matter of policy, as far as I'm concerned, has no business with Africa except for face value.
So my question to you is that, why is it so difficult to have an ambassador? I know you guys don't speak for government, but speak to this issue.
My sense is that this administration does not take foreign policy seriously. This president was just a few weeks old in office in 2023 when he became ECOWAS chairman, because that's when the slot fell on Nigeria. Yeah. And he didn't have foreign minister by then. He had no advisor on foreign affairs. And yet he went to ECOWAS and declared war on the three countries that broke away from ECOWAS. No, that had military regimes, military coup. He just went and threatened war without thinking through anything. Who does that? And today, he's the first Nigerian president presiding over the breakup of ECOWAS. And ECOWAS is celebrating 50 years this year. A very embarrassing thing. He is not well advised on the importance of foreign affairs. Now, coming to you, I'm surprised that a nation of this standing does not have ambassadors 2 years after he took over. Yeah. Who advises him?
It's going to be 2 years in May.
Who advises him? And now we have Trump rampaging across the world. Who is giving him advice on our relationship with the world, with Washington? I think the president, is he trying to save money? How much does an ambassador spend?
I mean, it's
very minimal.
That's the kind of feedback that you get, that, oh, okay, when the president saw the budget, he said that it's a lot of money. But I think you're right.
Let the president reduce the budget within the presidency. How many cars have been bought since he came into office? We don't need a lot of those cars. How many planes? And now we are hearing that new residences are going to be renovated in Lagos for vice president and president. I didn't even know that they stay in Lagos too.
Yeah, there is. There are official residences for both the president and the vice president.
In Lagos?
Oh, yes. I mean, being a former capital of the country. But good point, Ati. Yeah, madam, what's your take?
Well, there is a nexus between foreign policy, economy, national security. Now, why do countries like the United States of America, Saudi Arabia, Russia, UK, and even China place premium value on foreign policy to drive their national strategy, national development strategy? You need foreign policy to maintain and build, expand your alliances. You need foreign policy to leverage, to effectively manage your foreign direct investment. You need foreign policy to align with global best practices. You need foreign policy to be active, whether it is in the United Nations, like we're looking for the security position and all that. That being said, I don't want to second guess Mr. President, but I will use this opportunity to humbly, with profound respect, speak to Mr. President, to remind what he already knows as a strategist. Foreign policy should be the fulcrum of economic recovery without losing sight of our domestic policy. It should be a linchpin strategy, because we still need the money from outside the country to build. We need equipment, and we need to activate our raw materials. But beyond that, geopolitics and other things like you mentioned now are playing out. I will expect, or I will advise, without prejudice to what is inside that we don't know, why not have appointment of ambassadors in batches? Because it's taking time. You can now prioritize, for example, United States, the United Kingdom, like France. You take critical 20 or 15 and deploy. Now that will send a signal with regards to how serious we take foreign policy. For example, I was earlier talking about how we position and we hedge, for production and collection of these vaccines, for example, for the AIDS that are stopping, and how do we position going forward. So if you have an ambassador there, immediately you would have gone to sort, even if it is Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, to start engaging in that regard. For example, I tell you what, 2 weeks before the swearing in of Donald Trump, as an example, as bad as it is in Sudan, the ambassador of Sudan to the United Nations on the sidelines of meetings was saying that they have packaged a deal to speak with Trump to come and intervene on the Sudan crisis. You see the importance of foreign policy, like you rightly said. And if you don't have an ambassador to speak for you, the president has so many on his table. And when I see him, I see a man that is holding so many baggages that he doesn't need to carry. He speaks as an ambassador. He does so many things that other people should do. So why not deploy in batches? In priority, due to the importance of our foreign relations. And it also says something about all the time our president is coming without an ambassador, because this is an international protocol. It has a face-losing, value, even for the Far East. If you look at the culture of the Japanese and the Chinese and the Arabs, sometimes it gives you that packaging for you to say you have an ambassador that speaks for you, and if there's an issue, you become the last man standing. But if you go first, then there's no last line charge. So this is very crucial for us to have ambassadors, even if it is in batches, but more importantly, as a reflection of how important we place our foreign policy in our national strategy, we should upgrade it, and we should also expand it in terms of policy coherence for us to be sure-footed and for us to have more respect in the community with a better by gaining power.
Okay, excellent. So I'll just put in a chip and then we go to the next thing. I think that the president should consider urgently, more than ever before, the issue of ambassadors. Whatever the problem may be, it's no longer tenable that those guys are not there. And on the issue of ECOWAS, I want to say that, it was a difficult decision, but we must commend him for standing for democracy.
I agree.
Of course, maybe they didn't manage, the sanctions and what they said, but at least they said that, look, in West Africa, we stand for democracy. Let's go to local issues. I want to talk about 2027. Okay, so what are you guys picking up? There's a lot of chatter. Peter Obi is saying that, hey, no, I don't want to be, we don't need coalition just for power grab, which I think is good. And then they misquoted him and then came back and said, no, coalition is good, but not for this. And of course, you have Atiku Abubakar talking about the fact that, the courts are getting too much in the whole process, trying to also be the face for deepening our democracy. A lot of things are happening. People are saying that, we're going to have a coalition to defeat the incumbent. I just want to make it very broad. You guys take it wherever you want to go. Let's start with Eti.
I think Peter Obi and Atiku Abubakar have realized that they can't, at this time, merge the two parties and form one, just as APC did. They have thought about it, they have tried to work towards it, but too many factors came in and they have abandoned that idea. And they then they started thinking about alliance in which the two parties remain independent, existing, but one person will step down for the other. Of course, the man in Kanu Kokwanso said he has PhD. He can't.
Did he actually say that?
Oh yes, he said that in the last season that he has.
That because he has a PhD
in engineering, and he's been a senator, he's been governor, he's been in the House. He can't step down for anybody. Peter Obi, least of all. Of course, nobody will think that Atiku Abubakar would step down for Peter Obi. So alliance is not working. That is why they are preparing our minds now to another round of all the 3 or 4 or 5 of them contesting all over again on their respective parties. But Peter Obi has a peculiar problem. His platform, Labour Party, is facing serious crisis. I don't even think they want him in the party. So where will he go to? SDP is wooing him. Is he going to go to SDP, take another ticket nomination and run on that platform? 2027 is beginning to get close, smell. We are seeing the flavor of re-election turbulence. So far, I must commend President Tinubu for handling the politics of his presidency very well. He looks as if he's not even interested in second term. He's focused on his reforms, and he's not even backing off for political reasons. At this point, first-term presidents begins to say, okay, and they begins to back off, they begins to compromise. This president is not. He's focused on praising his VAT reforms and tax reforms through, as if he's not interested. I think it's because he knows Nigerian politics very well, that when the time comes, he will do what Nigerians always want and get his second term.
Interesting. Thank you, Eti. Madam.
From what I can see, having been a member of an opposition party and the leading party, of course, I left politics in 2005 to pursue my professional career. Now, moving on today, all our political mentors and colleagues from 1998 to date are all in all the political parties. Whether it is Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, whether it is, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, whether it is others that are Labour Party or Alhaji Rabiu Musa Konkoso, have all spread out. And that tells you the kind of politics in Nigeria. The politics of ideology is still a work in progress. And now to come to that question, it is highly likely, or it is highly unlikely, unless something disruptive is done on the part of the opposition.
Right.
The truth is, it is most likely President Tinubu is going to have what they call in football walkover to 2027 because it's a joke what is going on in the opposition, to be honest. And I say with all sense of responsibility, I'm disappointed at the kind of leadership that is provided at the party level. I'm disappointed at the kind of engagement that is happening across party. You see selfishness, you see, parochialism, and then the pretext of nationalism or patriotism is not reflecting in the actions. And I've said it many times, whether it is with due respect, His Excellency Peter Obi, or His Excellency Atiku Abubakar, or His Excellency Rabi Musa Konkoso, all of them for whom I have profound respect for, cannot lead any country if you cannot manage a political party. Period. So the spectacle in PDP yesterday, does that look like a party that can upstage an APC even at state level? So the truth is, if these people really mean well for Nigeria, the earlier they start smelling the coffee to recognize that united they stand, and they divided, they fragment their votes, and President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is going to have easy and close to win. And this narrative also, which to my mind is laughable, because if you continue deceiving yourself and say it is APC that is causing problem in your party, then you are saying you don't have the capacity, the political sagacity, the political acumen, the fluidity to hold your structure as a party, and to hold your people and do sometimes even the politics of give and take. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu twice had to step down his presidential ambition for the long game. That is strategy. With all due respect to Atiku Abubakar, every time he doesn't get it, then everything has to stop. And we saw also Peter Obi moving in that direction. We must understand our strengths and our weaknesses for us to also harness to achieve to take over the opportunities. We have a political colossus in the person of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu in charge. We can talk and wish him away, we can lament and complain, but unless they put their heads together, like it happened in 2015, because it's a doable. It is still the APC, it is still the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and co that did it. They can do it if they put their personal sentiments aside and look at Nigeria, as a project, a reality. And to learn from that, I will not support power going back to the north. Let it be clear. We agreed for north-south, shift of power in the interest of unity, in the interest of equity and justice. Let us work with that template so that the opposition will start putting a robust counter going forward. I'm saying this without prejudice to their constitutional right, to aspire for public office. But I'm saying they are all in their right elder statement. Whether you have a PhD or you have a secondary school certificate, from 1960 to date, 65% of people that took Nigeria to where it is today actually had school certs. So for me, while I have regard for that because of the times now, I think the issues are about character, this issue is about content, it's issue about what do you have for Nigeria, and they should come together. Only then will there be hope to even put APC on their toes to deliver what they promised. That is why the APC is having it easy.
Exactly. I mean, one or two things and then we conclude. The issue of lack of opposition, which is a very damaging problem, because how do you have a democracy, multi-party democracy, and there are no opposition, the way they are behaving. Somebody said that they didn't have an experience. I think it was the former deputy chairman of the party, PDP, that said that, these folks, don't really have an experience, doing opposition politics. They came in 1999 and they were there all the way to 2015. No experience about opposition, so that is a problem. But the other thing, and this is where I want you guys to come in, of course, you can also make a comment on that, is you already raised the point, Malam. Why is it difficult for somebody of the stature of Atiku Abubakar to understand that Nigerians have made a national consensus on rotational presidency? I mean, there are very few things that we have a consensus on. We have a consensus, in my view, that, hey, we don't want military anymore.
Yes.
And then we have a consensus on, look, this presidency thing, let it be from the north to the south. North has had 8 years recently with President Buhari. And it is the turn of the South. Even if you want to take it away from Mr. Tinubu, which I can't see the plan. There's nothing reasonable on the ground that suggests that. But even if you want to, it must still remain in the South. I'll start with you, Eti. Why is that difficult for Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, who has the capacity to bring the national following? If you look at his political family, he has everybody from everywhere. Is it just because of his ambition that he doesn't understand what it takes ultimately to be a statesman and understand this national consensus?
Yes, please. His ambition has beclouded his sense of judgment in this matter, I'm afraid. And it's such a big pity because he's a very intelligent man, very intelligent, very cosmopolitan, very smart, very wealthy, very politically savvy, very connected. But in this matter, he has allowed his ambition, his entitlement mentality, and his personal and self-interest to becloud him, his sense of judgment on this matter. It's a big problem. Some years ago, there were reports that some marabouts told Atiku that no matter what, he will be president of this country. I don't know if he still has that in the back of his mind, but he has made himself a laughing stock. He has made himself a laughing stock. People are making jest of him for not realizing that this presidency, as you said, the nation has agreed that it should be swinging back and forth between the two main regions, North and South. North and South is the single most prominent thing that we have agreed without a fight.
That is why I think that, so this idea of rotational presidency, which is a national consensus, should become constitutional. It's the only way to safeguard it. I mean, any attempts to try to draw the hand of the clock, I can tell you, for instance, in 2023, in the run-up to 2023, some folks went to the president and said, look, Northeast has never been the president. So they supported Lawan.
Yeah, we heard that.
And it caused a big, argument.
Yes.
Thank God for northern governors, and we must commend El-Rufai, on that score, although, there are several other stories about El-Rufai that we won't say yet. But we must commend El-Rufai.
Yes,
for standing and people like Nasarawa governor, generally all the northern governors say, no. This is the turn of the South, and the presidency had to issue a statement and say that, no, the president did not, doesn't have any, anointed candidates. Thank you so much, Malam Baba Yusuf and Mr. Etim for coming to Inside Sources.
Thank you.
All right. And there you have it, another edition of Inside Sources. Like we always say, Nigeria will prevail. It means that Nigeria will win. Nigeria will win because we won't relent. Our voices will be heard and we keep pushing. My name is Laulu Akonde. Thank you for watching. I'll see you at the next edition.